option, those jobs we can achieve it via programmatic. So we should not start every development with the program. We should start every development as much possible with using your declarative choices. Okay. If declarative choices fails and then we have no other choice but to code, then only we should be writing our epics. So it is tailored specifically for a particular purpose. It's not a general purpose language. Now, when I say it's not a general purpose language, we cannot write IO based code using Apex. We cannot write multi-threaded code using Apex. We cannot write file input output type of coding in my Apex. Okay, so Apex got a purpose. That purpose is support Salesforce data access and manipulation, where declarative is failed. What is multi-threaded code? So multi-threading is a concept where you can advise your system via programming language which operation should be completing first, order of your job. That's multi-threading, and the language which supports multi-threading coding, we call it multi-threaded language, or a language which supports multi-threading. So multi-threaded code is not always running asynchronously. Okay. So it runs in a synchronous fashion, but the context switching happens so fast that we feel that there are more than one job happening at any given instance. That's multi-threading. So you have single processor and you are switching the context of your process of your job or your function so fast that it gives you the feel of doing multiple job in a go. Whereas add future annotation force your transaction to run parallel. So not necessarily that multi-threaded code is asynchronous, where add future is asynchronous. So that's the difference between multi-threaded and add future annotation in Apex. So they are different. Okay. So next is it always your Apex always understand what is the underlying database. What you have specified in that underlying database. What is the content of the schema? So it understands the in and out of your schema. We call it metadata awareness. It understands the organization metadata very well. So when I say that it's understand your metadata very well, it means if you try to delete a field or if you try to delete a record that is already participated or participating in a particular module, particular process, it will not let you delete that. So if I go to Apex and I try to delete a record which is already participating in a workflow rule, and that workflow rule is still not finished, your system will not let you delete that. And it will tell you that this is already running for a workflow rule, you cannot delete this record. So that's what we call as understanding of organization's metadata or metadata awareness. So your Apex is designed to work effectively and efficiently in the multi-tenant environment. That means your Apex is designed to share resources because we are working in a multi-tenant environment and we all as a customer already have definite access to our resources. So when they say the resources are free in Salesforce, that means whichever resources we are using. For example, we are running an Apex code, so we are using their, we are finding a socle. So socle is a kind of resource there. We are creating an object. So object limitation is a resource over there. So the moment you buy a particular license, there will be set of resources given to you. So those resources are actually free because that's coming from your Apex license. So I have a question. Future versus multi-thread. See, multi-threading is actually a synchronous activity, but there is a context switching happen. So we get a feel that there are multiple threads running synchronously at a time. That is, multiple threads running asynchronously at any given point of time. So that is possible because of context switching, because your context gets switched between multiple threads so fast that we feel that multiple threads are running in the same time, which is not true. It's just a context switching which enables that kind of behavior. Whereas add future annotation forces the system to go for parallel transaction, to go for asynchronous transaction. So add future is pure asynchronous, whereas multi-thread is not pure asynchronous. Now, is future identical to a callback? So add future uses a callback at as a part of the architecture. Asynchronous not going to be present in the exam, so that's why it's not part of the deck. But people do have some questions there, so I was just answering it. So yes, that is the page that we are still doing, which is what is Apex, but I'm receiving a lot of questions from there, so I'm answering them on that. Yeah, so that is the page we are showing. What is Apex is a page, which is displayed by me. Apex do not support multi-threading. You cannot write multi-threaded code because multi-threaded code means that you are writing you are actually writing a server piece that how to consume resource, and we are nobody to advise that to Salesforce because Salesforce ensure the multi-tenancy at its core level. So we cannot advise multi-threaded to Salesforce, and that's why multi-threaded API support is not at all available in Apex. Apex and declarative configuration, as I was explaining, that Apex is metadata aware. It understands schema and the configuration that you have done in your org. So if you try to delete a particular method which is being referred by a particular formula or approval process or workflow rule, you'll get to see the error that this cannot be deleted because it's being referred by other field or object or other process. Okay. So these are the primitive data types: blob, boolean, date, date and time. Date and date and time, they are different in terms of date only considers date, whereas date and time will capture date and time both, complete timestamp. Hello, am I audible to all? Yep, so I get to see a lot of yes. So Neeraj, please check your connection. Apart from that, yes, I will explain the wrapper class little later. Just wait for some time. Okay. So date time, the difference is date captures only date and date time captures a complete timestamp. Decimal and double, they both capture fractional values. Decimal is a smaller range in the fractional value, whereas double is a bigger range for the fractional values. ID is only used to store ID, but ID and string can be interchangeable. So that means I can store Salesforce record ID in the ID type variable, or we can store it in the string type variable. We can assign ID value to a string, and vice versa is also true. That means we can assign string also to the ID given that it is a valid ID, because ID is a mixture of numbers and alphabets, so it's alphanumeric. I do not understand your question when you ask string static method into an ID field. Okay, so please elaborate your question on a string starting method into an ID field. So what I was trying to explain, that if I have an ID, let me do the coding for you. I'll go to my org, okay. That's my org, and I'll say developer console. Let this developer console get open. And I will open execute anonymous window. I hope you can see the screen here. Coming back to every question, just give me a time. Neeraj, kindly look into your settings because people can hear me. I'm not sure why you cannot hear me. Look into your setting, please. So I declare an ID and I say cert ID equal to, I'll copy this ID. I can declare a string s variable and I can assign this cert ID there. So that's what I was trying to explain, that your ID can capture the ID field, 15 or 18 digit. We can also store ID directly to string variable as well, because string can also capture alphanumeric. Okay. But if you're planning to store any string back into ID, that is, if I try to do something like this, ID cert ID2 equal to S, I need to ensure that this S is a valid ID. Okay, now let's go to the next question that I had in my list here. Primitive versus non-primitives. Okay, so primitives are these one which we have listed in our deck. These are the primitives. Non-primitive will be user-defined. Okay, so user-defined, like if you create a wrapper class. For example, let me just show you that too. So I'll show you how you can create your user-defined type. So I'll just quickly go and I create a new Apex class. I will say wrapper contact. So I'm trying to create my own type here, and this data type will capture one contact type and one uh, boolean checkbox or something like that. So whenever I use this wrapper contact, it is going to give me these two together. So that's my user defined data type. This user defined data type talks about this data set along with the boolean type. So that is the difference between primitive and non-primitive. Primitives are these ones, predefined one, and non-primitive that you are going to declare as your own type. And blob is a data type which will use binary data, which can store binary data. The difference between static and final variable: static, where we can change values; final, where we cannot change values. So if I go back to this class and I will declare my final variable. So I just say public final integer x equal to 10. So it's final. I cannot change its value. But if I say public static integer y equal to 20, so in any piece of code, so if I write another public method, public void show, and there I can go and write y is equal to y plus x. That's allowed because static can have change value, but final I cannot. Once I have allocated a value to a final variable, I cannot change that value. So that is final. That's like a constant. Whereas static is not constant, but static is going to leave as long as your transaction leaves, and it's going to be one value. So wherever you access the value of y, the most updated value will be provided. So that is the difference between static variable and final variable. Between ID and string, typecasting is not required. Other than that, possibly yes. Line number 3. Which one? This one? You mean to say line number 3 in my current code? Does this work? Which one you're pointing to, Jesus? From ID to string, the interchange will happen automatically. Other than these two types, we have to cast, considering that it's you know, storable there. Anonymous code affects to real data. Yes, yes. Anonymous code very much affects to data. If anybody is having an audio problem, reconnect. Data type of type object and S object. Any data type other than this is non-primitive. Okay. Anything other than Boolean, date, time, decimal, double is going to be non-primitive. So if I create a count variable, it's non-primitive. If I declare a variable of type course, it's non-primitive. Actually, storing attachment, we can do it directly in the attachment type of the object. Okay, so basically blob can be used for any binary data like a music piece, like a binary information that we would like to store. So that's where we are going to use blob. Can you go slide back? Okay. We should use final variable when we want to create one particular value and want every child or inheriting class use the same value. For example, if I am writing a mathematical related utility class, I would like to use a value for a pi. So we will be creating a pi as a final variable and setting as 3.14. So people can use two values for pi, right? 22/7 or 3.14. And both will give you a fraction of differences in terms of result in a decimal value. So we can finalize one value, either 3.14 or 22/7 as a final. So no one can change the value for a pi, and you can just keep using the same value anywhere you like. As Apex is highly case insensitive, so you can write variable in a small case and use it in a capital will have no effect. So it will be working fine. The difference between final and static, of course, I'll repeat once again. This final variable, once we create and assign a value, we cannot change it. Whereas static variable, you can assign a value, you can change that value in the entire transaction. So static scope is valid for entire transaction. Okay, so the first difference here is that final variable,
Oh my God.
once assigned, cannot change, whereas static can change its value. So we can change the starting value. That's the first difference. Second difference would be scope decided as per the origin class. So where we declare it, it's available as per the accessibility, whether it's public, private, or protected, where static variables scope is equivalent to transaction. So they are the two major difference between static and final. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So they are the primitives type. And another point to note here that let's say I declare a variable. Okay, I say integer x. Sorry, spelling correct. Integer x. That's all. And I'll say system dot debug, and I'll try to print x. So it will print its value in the log. So I'll go to execute. This will generate a log file for me, and I click on debug only. What is the value? I don't see 0. I see null, right? The type of variable which I have declared is of type integer. The data type is integer. I haven't provided any value, so it's giving me null. As we know, null is already only assigned to the object type. Okay, so if you know a bit about Java, so you would have known about the wrapper classes there. So that wrapper class is different from the wrapper class that we have in Salesforce. So in Salesforce, every primitive type is actually of type object. So if you don't define a value there, it will return you always none. So Apex initializes all variables regardless of their type to the special value null. So all the primitive type is actually of type object here. You can declare constant using static and final modifier. But even if you just use final, that also going to declare as constant. Using static plus final means you are making a value as constant and you're making the scope as transaction scope. So for entire transaction, the value of final variable would remain same. So we have a question here. You selected Apex class only to create a wrapper. Is wrapper same as Apex? So I'll answer your question here. We can use Apex class not just to create a wrapper class, but any utility class. We can use Apex class to be called from a Visualforce page. We can use Apex class to be called from a trigger. So wrapper in Salesforce, wrapper class is a special Apex class which we use to create our user-defined data type. Okay, so wrapper class in Salesforce is a special class which we use to define user-defined data type. That's a wrapper class. Character is also a primitive. You mean it's a string? Yes, string is also primitive. Yes, we can have media, video, image stored in our record. Pi number is wrong. That's my oh yeah, static final double pi is 3.142857. I'm sorry about that if it's wrong. Okay. Okay. In terms of exam, whether we will have many questions on this. See, from this particular slide, it's as actually it's a fundamental slide. You should be knowing the difference between final, static, primitives, non-primitives, ID and string compatibility. Okay, so those differences should be you should be aware of that. Yes, so the color is changed with the capital letter as Burak, you asked me. It's because we are using a particular IDE, right? So this IDE got its own formatting. That's all. But even if I write a small account or capital A account, it will do the same job. Okay. Yes, they are the primitive type, which is currently displayed on my page. No, integer cannot be used as int, as your Apex is case insensitive, but it is highly type restrictive. Okay, so it is type restricted, so it's highly type oriented. So you cannot say integer as int or int as integer. So integer is integer. That's all. Okay, so that's all I have question here. Any more advantage the use of primitive? Of course, you should use primitives wherever you can, because primitive is going to give you values. And in a programming, we require values many times, not just the object. Yes, wrapper classes and inner classes, they are different. Inner classes are when we declare a class inside a class. Let me just give you a quick look and yeah. So this is my class, right, guys and girls? So this is my class. If I declare a class inside another class, so this is inner class. Okay. So wrapper class is basically the purpose defines wrapper class. And for inner class, it's a syntax which defines it as an inner class. Okay, so the difference is different. is that. So wrapper class purpose, when we want to create our own data type, our user defined structure. If I want to create our user defined data structure, we'll be using a wrapper class. And if I want to create inner classes, it means class inside an inner class, then it has to be inner class. So this is the example for inner class which I've shown you here. Object class used for casting and okay, Jesus, for your question, uh, in Apex we do not have object. Actually, we have S object. So I'm going to take a time to answer your question, Jesus. Just give me 2 more minutes. I will go there and I'll answer about the casting. Okay. Is it possible to retrieve values through wrapper class? Yes, it's possible. You can write SOCL to populate that value. So for example, if this is my wrapper class, so I'm answering question of Digna. So let's say this is my wrapper class and I want contact uh, C. I can write, let's say, for example, it can be anything, okay? I'm writing a constructor. And there I say C equal to, and I can write my SOCL here to get a value. So it's possible to retrieve values through wrapper class. So when you instantiate this wrapper class and you get a value C, you will get the value from the SOCL. A value, any workaround for covariant? Covariant return type issue. Kindly explain more on your question, please, Arjun. How to access inner class variables from outer class and vice versa? Oh, okay. I understand. Are you a Java programmer? Okay. So basically, inner classes can fetch values from the outer classes because they all are member similar, and your inner class values to be accessed in the outer class, you need to instantiate it and get the value there. When you should inner class, okay, so there's a concept behind it. You should use inner classes when we think the existence of inner class is depending on the existence of outer class. For example, if I'm going to create schedule, let's say course schedule I'm creating. If I'm creating a course schedule, and when I'm creating a course schedule, then only the attendee should be created. Without delivery, the attendee doesn't hold any importance. You know what we're talking about? We're talking more about the MD relationship. So in a situation where you need to achieve MD relationship among two different classes, not two different objects, then is the time to use inner classes in Salesforce. Because see, inner classes concepts are not originating from Apex. Inner class concept is originating from uh, our language, programming languages. Okay, and Apex is using such object-oriented programming language, so it's providing you the feature of creating inner classes. But we can achieve inner class MD relationship in among the objects. So if you have to achieve MD relationship among the objects, so you have MD relationship. But for inner classes, it's only when the existence of those variables, those method, uh, only depending on the outer class. So that is the time to have an inner class. Does a constructor don't require a return? No. Constructor do not require a return type. It's a special member method without return type. All right. So I'm going back or out from this slide to the next slide. Okay. So they are the different type of collection. Do we have any question from list, set, or map? Please shoot the questions. Yeah, now I'm having questions. Very good. Um, Jesus, just give me a moment. I'll answer you on object, okay? After the slide. Perfect. Uh, Okay, yeah, I'll just do that for you. Can we have a constructor in a wrapper class? Of course, ROC, we can have a constructor in a wrapper class. Best use case for using map. I'll give you a use case of a map in Salesforce. Okay, we use map in Salesforce to create a cache of records, and that cache of records can be used anywhere in the program in the same class, or we can pass it to another class as a parameter. That is the purpose of using map. And map, we can use key value pair in a map. As you know, key can be an ID and value can be entire record. So that way you can perform search sorting faster on that cache of records that you have stored in the map. So that is the requirement of map or use case of a map in Apex. Okay, Digna, let me know if that information is sufficient for you on map. So map, again, we use it to create a cache of records where key is ID and value is the entire record. That way the sorting, searching is faster and we can pass the same cache to another program or piece of program. Is map collection ordered? Ordered in terms of key, yes. When do we use set in Apex? Good. So we use set in Apex Sujit when we would like to, perform a SOCL, and that SOCL requires a filter criteria. So, for example, if I have to find out all account based out in California, San Francisco, so I can use a set of California and San Francisco, and I pass it to my SOCL to compare. So we can create a unique value set and we can compare against it in our SOCL. Or if I want to collect unique values and use it, anywhere in our program, we can make set. When would be the break? Oh, okay. I'll answer it later. Set list are 1:1, map is 2:2. What do you mean by that? 1:1, 2:2, and 3:3? I'm sorry, Pradeep, I couldn't get your question. 1:1. Map is 2:2. How about 3:3? There's no 3:3. How to convert a map values into a list? Okay, so there is a method. So Cyan, the method is you will call a method like map dot values. I'm answering in your question. So there's a method values. You have to call that method on a map. You will convert the map value into a list. Which are most widely used among list, set, and map? It's a list. Because list is a default return type of any SOCL citizen. How do we save map? You can call, you mean to say, Milind, you mean to say how we can save records that we have in a map. So you'll be calling like this. So you say update. Okay, let me write it if anybody still wants to understand that. So what I'm going to do quickly, I'll take you to anonymous window. And let's say I will be writing update map dot values if you want to save map values. If you want to save key, that whatever you have stored in the key, then you'll say update map dot dot key set. So this will save the key values, and the first line number one will save the values of the map. Okay. How to convert a map to a list? So if instead of Control Z, Control C, and I'll write this list of whatever object, let's say it's account, and ACCT list equal to this. Will save your values as a list, okay? Where you want to use lists or G? Yes, to collect unique values from a yes, correct. You got that correct. Can we use all three collection triggers? Yes, I'll discuss it in some time, Digna, and you'll see how we can use all three together. No duplicate values allowed in set, correct? Okay, list of wrappers, why do we create it? Let me okay people, I'll share one nice trailhead or maybe a doc, guys. This is my